This sleep story and all the rest of my sleep stories can be found on my Dan Jones Hypnosis Sleep Stories podcast, which can be found at danjoneshypnosis.com. And 20 of these sleep stories can be found in my book Bedtime Stories for Grown-Ups, and I also have 2 books of stories for children, Relaxing Tales for Children and Sleepy Bedtime Tales. So if you like this story, give it a thumbs up and leave any comments below, and feel free to share this with anyone else who may struggle with sleep or may find this interesting. So just take a moment to close your eyes and begin to comfortably drift off asleep. And as you comfortably drift off asleep, I'm just going to be talking in the background, telling you a story. And while you listen to this story, I don't know whether you'll fall asleep quickly to the words I use. What are the mental imagery that you have? Or maybe the spaces between my words. You can have a sense of a man walking through some woodland. He's walking towards a large lake where he has a boat moored. And he's walking through that woodland, and it's a bright and warm summer's day. And as he walks through the woodland, he's aware of the sounds of cracking twigs beneath his feet. He's aware of the sounds of rustling leaves as the wind blows a breeze. He's aware of sounds of birds in the distance and other animals. And he's out here to have a calm, relaxing time. A time away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. And so he walks through that woodland, noticing the way that the sun dances in front of him as it shines down through the leaves of the trees, and the cool breeze on his face. And after some time, he finds himself approaching a clearing, and in that clearing he can see the lake, and he approaches that clearing, walks out into that clearing, and he gazes out across the lake, and he can see one jetty sticking out into the water, and his boat at that jetty. And he walks slowly and calmly towards that boat. And he can feel the warmth of the sun on his skin. Hear the rustling leaves behind him as he moves away from the woodland. And he boards his boat. And as he boards his boat, he unmoors it. And then he steers the boat away from the shore, out into the vast lake, a lake so large he can't see the other side of it. And he guides his boat out towards the centre of the lake. He likes to be able to have a sense of peace and calm. He likes to feel a sense of distance from everything while he enjoys that peace and calm. And as he guides the boat further out into the lake, so the sun continues to pass across the sky. And as the sun passes across the sky, so it begins to lower in the sky. And the further out into the lake he gets, the quieter things get, and the calmer and more relaxed he feels. And out in the centre of the lake, he drops an anchor and relaxes on the boat. And he relaxes back on a reclining chair on the boat. He closes his eyes and breathes in that watery smelling air and feels that sense of relaxation passing through his body. With each in-breath he feels like he's breathing in relaxation, and each out-breath he feels like he's breathing out stress and any tension from the day. And he feels his mind calming and clearing. And while he lie there in that reclining chair, he notices the feeling of the way the boat just gently bobs on the water as each wave passes by. And he feels almost like the movement of the boat is gently rocking him to sleep. And as that movement of the boat gently rocks him to sleep, so the sun continues its journey across the sky. It won't be long before the sun begins to set. And while the sun is gently setting, so this person begins to drift into a dream, begins to drift comfortably into a reverie. He imagines himself sitting up and discovering that he's in a library. And he stands up and he walks around and explores the library. And as he looks around, he notices a book which seems to stand out to him. It looks like a really old book, and he goes over to that book. He takes the book off the shelf, takes it back to his seat, places that book in front of him, and as he does, he notices the smell of that old book, the feel of the old book in his fingertips, the weight of that old book. And as he begins to open the book, he notices what that feels like, to be opening the cover of an old book, to be turning the first page, and the second, and the third. And he doesn't know what it is that's drawing him into this book, but he begins to read. And as he begins to read, he begins to imagine what it is the book is about. And he starts to read Once upon a time. There was a charming young lad, And this charming young lad went out one day, and he was poor, and he was looking at different ways to make some money to support his family. And this charming young lad took one of the cows out to market to try and sell one of the cows. And no one was giving him any money for the cow. He tried to sell it to different farmers. He tried to sell it to all sorts of people. And no one was giving him any money. And after a while of trying to sell that cow, the market came to a close, and he hadn't sold the cow, and he was disappointed with himself. And so he started his journey home. And as he started his journey home, he noticed someone sat on a fence, and the person greeted him, and he responded, and he continued walking, and the person climbed down from the fence and caught up, and started asking him about why he looks like he's sad or upset for some reason. And he said it's because he's got this cow, and the person asked him, well, the cow seems fine to me. Why would you be sad and upset when you've got such a wonderful looking cow? And he explained that it's all very well having a wonderful looking cow, but it doesn't help. He needs the money. He needs money to buy food and buy things for his family. And he'd hoped he could sell the cow. And this person offered him some beans, told him that they're magic beans. And he thought that was stupid. You don't get things like magic beans. And the person said that they are magic beans, and if you just believe and you do the right thing, you'll get what it is you need. And something about the way this person presented themselves made this charming young man think, okay, I'll give it a go. And the charming young man sold the cow for a handful of beans. And the young man continued his journey home, cowless. And when he got home, his family weren't pleased with the fact that he'd sold the cow for some beans. And he said he'd been told that if he plants the beans, then all his answers will be solved. And so he said, whether his family believes in him or not, he's going to believe in himself. And he went outside the back of the house. He found a spot of their land that he felt was the best place to plant these beans. He wanted somewhere that was damp enough soil, that got enough sunlight. And so he planted the beans and went back indoors. And the next day he went out and he dug up the beans and had a look at them to see how they were getting on. Nothing had happened. And so he buried them again And the next day he came out. He dug up the beans to see if anything had happened, and nothing had happened. And so he buried them again. And the next day he went out and dug up the beans to see if anything had happened, and nothing had happened, and so he buried them again. And this went on day after day, week after week. And his family were despairing, were thinking, "We told you they were just beans." And eventually the charming young man decided they were just beans. There was nothing magical or special about them. And the next day he didn't bother checking them. Or the next day, nor the day after that. Or the week after that. Or the month after that. He just worked on other ideas, other ways to make some income. And then one day, many months after he first got those beans, he woke up, went outside, and noticed this enormous beanstalk stretching way up into the clouds. He had no idea where it came from, how it got there. All he could assume was that it was to do with the beans that he'd planted, and that perhaps by not checking them all the time, he'd actually given them a chance to work. He'd actually given them a chance to grow. And so he climbed that beanstalk. He didn't know what he was going to find. All he knew was that he'd never seen a giant beanstalk before. And so, if the giant beanstalk is real, maybe everything else is real. Maybe all his answers are at the top of the beanstalk. And he climbed the beanstalk. And it was a lot of struggle and hard work. And every now and then he would turn and look around and look down on the land below and be in awe at how far he could see. And he continued climbing higher and higher. And after hours of climbing and aching muscles, he finally reached the top. And as he reached the top, he looked around. And as he looked around, he noticed it was like a whole land up here. And he was sure that there was no land in the sky. He had seen clouds before, and he had seen no clouds before. He had never seen a land in the sky. And somehow this beanstalk must have transported or connected with an alternative realm. And he started exploring this realm and was in awe at the size of the buildings up here. And he didn't know how the person he'd met all those months ago knew about this place, or knew that they were magic beans, or whether anyone else had ever been here before. And so he explored. and the buildings were so large he was able to just crouch down and walk under the doors. And he walked under a door, and he could hear movement. He could hear sounds of breathing. And he noticed in the room that he'd walked into, which was like a vast chamber, that there was a few huge people sat around a fire, just chatting to each other. And as he got closer, he noticed their incredible size. He also noticed that they seemed to have lots of riches. He could see lots of things that were his size, as if perhaps they had somehow got hold of stuff from his land. And so he explored different rooms, and he found a goose, and he thought he would take that goose home for something to eat, and so he put the goose into a cage, ready to take away with him, and thought he would just do a bit more exploring first. And while he explored, he decided that he couldn't steal from these people. This was their goose, and the charming young man wandered around and realized that these people, although they looked like they had lots of riches, it appeared like perhaps they didn't, like maybe this was some kind of a bank or some kind of a storage place, because he could hear them talking. And the way they were talking made him sound like these people were similar to him, that they're just gathering up among themselves all the different things they own into one place, and that in whatever this world is, they're attempting to raise enough money to buy things just like he was trying to raise enough money to buy things for his family, and they're gathering up what to sell. And so he felt that he couldn't steal that goose. And so he let the goose go. And he approached the people, and they couldn't hear him while he was on the ground shouting up, trying to get their attention. So he climbed up the huge table leg, climbed up onto the table. He looked over at them in their chairs, and he called over to them, and he moved around and jumped around and tried to get their attention. Eventually one of them noticed him, and they created like a microphone that they placed down on the table, and the charming man went over to the microphone and spoke into it and explained his problem on the place that he comes from. And they listened, and they wondered about how they could help. That they've been trapped up here in this land, unable to take any path down to the land below, down to the other realm. and no one from the other realm had come to them for a very long time. And they used to work together. There were things that these people could do that the people in the other realm couldn't do. And there were things that people on Earth could do that these people couldn't do. And they said that he should take the goose because the goose lays golden eggs. And he didn't believe them at first, but then he wondered. He didn't believe that you could have a giant beanstalk that travelled through realms. And so he left with the goose. But the deal was that he would leave that bridge available so that they could travel from one realm to another, so that they can all work together. And this charming young man arrived back at his home and presented the goose, and his family thought, is that something you expect us just to kill and eat? And he explained that it lays golden eggs, and they didn't believe him until it laid a golden egg. And each golden egg meant that there was enough money to be able to go to market, to buy what they need to buy. And they were able to work with those in the other realm. And have the two realms connected again, working together again. And the book continued for a while, telling this story of what happened next, how they all worked together, how they solved the problems in both realms. And then the book ended with the end. And the man in the library closed the book. Curious, because it didn't sound like the story he knew. And yet he was drawn to that book, as if something about it was going to educate him. And he went and he placed that book back on the shelf, and as he did he heard a click, and then the bookshelf moved and swung open, and he discovered a secret entrance. And he walked through that secret entrance and down a staircase the other side of the entrance, down the 10 steps, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all the way to the bottom of the staircase, carefully stepping on the floor at the bottom of the staircase. And he started exploring this room down here under the library. There was a certain fresh smell, a fragrant smell, and a feeling of calmness and compassion. And he could see a pedestal in the middle of the room. And he walked over to the pedestal, and on that pedestal he could see a book, an ancient-looking book. And he carefully opened the book, and he could see that there was writing, and he didn't recognize it at all, and yet somehow he could understand it. And he read that writing, This is the book of you. And that made no sense to him, but he was curious and he opened the book, turning the pages. Every page was blank. And he kept turning the pages and turning the pages. And he got all the way to the back page, turned the last page, and just saw a mirror on the back page. And he could just see his own reflection in that mirror. And he stared at himself for a while, trying to figure it all out. And as he stared at himself, so a smile came to his face, as a certain insight occurred. And with that smile he closed the book. And as he closed the book, so he heard a wall moving, like a stone wall sliding open. And that stone wall led through a clear, safe path. From under that library, and came out in a cave overlooking a vast valley. And he followed that path through the cave, hearing the echoey drip of water, feeling the cool breeze that blew through the cave. And arriving at that valley, gazing out over the valley, and being amazed at what he saw. Seeing a valley with huge meadows, giant trees, and enormous dinosaurs, sauropods, just grazing, swinging their heads from left to right as they graze, and then taking a couple of steps, swinging the head from left to right again as they graze. In great herds, taking another step, swinging their heads left to right as they graze, and then another step. And then there were smaller herds of dinosaurs, eating grass. Other dinosaurs hunting other dinosaurs and trying to sneak up on them. Almost like somehow this was a lost world that this man had come out in. And so he climbed down from the cave down into the valley to get a closer look, and he explored through the valley, hearing the call of different dinosaurs, feeling the rumble under his feet with each step they took. Feeling a sense of excitement and calmness and intrigue and wonder as he explored this land. And as he explored, he figured out that he was learning about himself, discovering things about himself from this experience. And after some time exploring, he found his way back to the library, sat back down in that chair, then found himself awaking on that boat, gazing up and noticing how the sun has set. Just looking up at the Milky Way stretched across the sky. Just gazing up as his eyes acclimatise, noticing shooting stars, having this feeling like he can hear them whistling and hissing past, when in fact he probably can't hear anything from them. Hearing the sploshing, sloshing sound of the water against the boat, feeling that rocking of the boat, just feeling so at one with the world, so peaceful, so calm, so relaxed. And just enjoying being in the moment, not attaching to anything, just letting thoughts come and go without paying them any real attention, just being aware that they come and go. Just gazing up into space, imagining what it would be like to be out in space, exploring the universe. Wondering about what beauty there must be out there, about all the beauty here on Earth, all the things there are to discover here on Earth, and what there must be out there in the rest of the cosmos that's undiscovered, unexplored, when this little speck in space contains so much. And as he gazed up and wondered, and let his mind wander, so he drifted off asleep for the night. And as he drifted off asleep, so he just pulled a blanket over himself in that chair, on his boat, gazing up at the sky, with his eyes getting heavy and closing, relaxed. And after drifting off asleep, he awoke some time later to the feeling of the warmth of the morning sun on his face. And as he awoke, he gazed out off his boat, gazed out across the water, noticing how still that water was, with a mist hanging over the water. And he just enjoyed being in the moment before travelling back to the shore, mooring his boat up again, and then heading back into the woods to head back home. Following his relaxing, calming break.